The funeral of Rafael Ramos, police officer Rafael Ramos. Joining me at this time from Washington, D.C. to comment on this is political analyst Shelby Emmett. She's with Project 21. Shelby, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
Doing terrific. Shelby, a case of racism against blacks in New York City, a reason for should blacks feel threatened by New York City police officers, or should police officers feel threatened by the mayor and the president?
I think the whole community in New York should be threatened by the mayor. I think he was, of course, doing what a lot of liberals do with power. He took a group of people, in this case African Americans, and he's using us like liberals do. And I'm proud to say that the police are standing up to this. And I just wish more black people in New York would see what was going on here, that they're being played like we're always being played. And at the end of the day, he's not concerned at all about safety or education for black people. He's just concerned with power.
All right, so some very inflammatory statements you made. Let's take a step back. I will agree that these past 6 years, we have seen this White House, you're talking about the mayor, but let's talk about you talk about liberal, this White House play polarizing politics over leadership on case after case after every opportunity they have every opportunity this White House has to pit people, American citizens, against each other based upon skin color, based upon sexual preference, based upon income, on and on and on. They exploit that opportunity. Are you saying that you believe that Mayor de Blasio does not have a belief, does not believe what he is saying? He is merely playing polarizing politics to accomplish his agenda?
Of course I do. The way that he even invokes his own son in this issue, his son is biracial, I'm biracial myself, and I could never imagine my parents saying, oh, I wouldn't imagine how a police officer would treat her in this situation, because at least in those situations, even if you disagree with the law or not, both of those individuals that we were speaking about in terms of those victims of homicides by those police officers were breaking the law. I find it reprehensible that he would automatically assume that every single black young man in this country has this problem, and then to automatically live up his son to those type of credentials. I just think he's playing politics and using people, and it's nothing different than what they always do. And I think in this case, it backfired because the police turned against him.
It had not occurred to me that he was playing politics. I don't know de Blasio as well as perhaps you do. I don't follow the man until recently, like we do President Obama. But you bring up an excellent point. I've interviewed a lot of politicians over the years, and they often have told me, please do not bring up any reference to my family. I do not want to put my family in the story. And even President Obama, he says, if I had a son, he never references his daughters, which I think makes a lot of sense. The fact that you bring up, Shelby Emmett, that Bill de Blasio threw his son right into in the middle of this story is an example of him trying to cater to the minority vote, trying to reach out and appeal to people that may look like his wife, may look like his son, people who may not, may be a different skin color than he is. I agree with you. That was a despicable political tactic. The police officers who turned their back on Bill de Blasio, was that primarily all white officers, as it's being often portrayed by some in the media? Or are you aware or not, Shelby Emmett, if it was, as a general rule, officers of all background and makeup?
I have a couple friends that are actually police officers, both black men, and one of those friends I know for sure actually did go to New York. I don't think that this is much of a racial issue with the police as it is so much as I know firsthand of a lot of minority police officers that feel they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They understand where many of the grievances, the frustration of black Americans are coming from, but at the same time, they also have to work every day, and they have to live in those communities or have to go to work and put themselves in danger. So I think a lot of those cops, regardless, I think they were standing behind blue, not black or white or anything else, but just there for a coworker, the way any of us would if we had a coworker gunned down or hurt at our own place of employment.
And that is an important point to make. that police officers of all background stood behind the blue line, not the color of their skin, as this mayor and this president would prefer it to be, or like us to believe it to be. What is the solution out there? You say it's not racism. It's not racist. The mayor has made it that way. However, apparently a lot of black folks in New York City feel differently. First of all, do you agree with that statement I just made? And if you do agree with that statement, how does the police department reach out to black communities and say, wait a minute, this was never about race, and you shouldn't have to fear that?
Well, I think that, of course, there's still racism in this country, but I think the problem that we have today is we're not having an honest conversation. And that means that black people, black Americans, have to start taking a little more personal responsibility and accountability for how we are acting, how we are teaching our children to act around police, to be aggressive, to be fearful. It's a two-way street. New York has done a great job. I think over 50% of their police department is ethnically diverse. More of that needs to happen, but that can't be something that the state does. Black people have to take first and foremost responsibility for our own communities. That means raise your son to want to be a police officer instead of raising your son to fear or hate the police. And this has to work both ways, from the community, churches, parents. A lot of this just comes back to basic common sense, personal responsibility, accountability, and respect for people and authority. And unfortunately, that's something that there is a lot of disrespect happening in the black community around these issues. Some of it legit, some of it not. But until we take ownership and responsibility for that, we're just going to keep going back and forth with this.
Memo to those on the left out there. I, Rick Amato, not a black person, I get a lump in my throat. Well, not a lump in my throat, but I get tense when I see a police officer behind me in a car while I'm driving. I make sure I slow down to 55, because on these California freeways, I'm sure I'm over that. And it's not about race, as you say, Shelby Emmett. It's not a pleasant experience for all folks to encounter a police officer, but when they do, they need to show respect, restraint, and comply with the officer. Shelby Emmett, Project 21 political analyst, thank you for joining us.